sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry, here.
It's going to be a tough deal to make, because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden, because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia, the 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that. All right. We'll see what we can do about putting it together. Thank you.
Guys, let's go. Guys, come on, let's go.
We'll see. I don't know.
All right, guys, come on. Please. Hey, come on. Guys, come on. Let's move, please.
Well, that was indeed extraordinary television, a most remarkable press conference there between Donald Trump and Vladimir Zelensky, and of course J.D. Vance there. And with me in the studio to discuss this extraordinary press conference, I've got former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett and political consultant Alex Dean. Matthew, Alex, the most extraordinary press conference there, where Trump accused Zelensky of not being thankful. Really, he's doing politics exactly as he does business, isn't he, Matthew?
Yeah, and he's been bankrupt several times, so I wouldn't take that route if I was him. I'm astounded, like most people. I thought it made very awkward viewing. To say to a sort of democratically elected leader of a sovereign nation, you know, to treat him as if he's some sort of tin pot dictator, as much as he may view him as that, is not the case. And I think one of the most striking things he said was, I've emboldened you to be a tough guy. This guy's been leading his country through war for nearly the last 3 years, or over 3 years now. Donald Trump's the same man who reportedly made up the fact that he had a poorly little ankle and couldn't go to war in Vietnam. He wouldn't know war if it looked him in the face. He's not got any courage whatsoever. And it felt, actually, probably the way he does do business, I would imagine, as quite bullying. As soon as he turned up, we didn't see the scenes there. As soon as he turned up, he's going, oh, look, he's dressed up today for me, to try and mock him immediately in front of everybody, and you've got a 2-on-1 there with Vance. Despicable lack of statesman-like behaviour.
And I think, Alex, these are the kind of discussions that you maybe would expect world leaders to have behind closed doors, but not in front of the world media. It's absolutely exceptional.
Extraordinary television, totally in favour of people who are going through the kind of experience that the Ukrainians are going through, having a frank discussion with their most significant benefactor, the Americans, but not like this. I mean, we were in the green room, and your very nice guy who looks after security here at GBNews said, should they be talking about this in public? The makeup guys, oh my God. The whole room was just frozen in horror that this was playing out on our televisions. I mean, in my personal view, first of all, it makes you realise quite how well Keir Starmer's visit went,
yes.
right? I say that as a Tory, because this is the alternative, absolutely extraordinary. But the second thing is, this is just deeply unedifying for all concerned. But I completely accept Matthew's point that the bigger offender is Donald Trump. It did look like 2-on-1 with Vance backing up Trump. I know they're on home turf, but still, there is such a thing as a visual. It did look bullying. And I'm often accused on this channel and elsewhere of being a Trump apologist. Very hard to make any sort of excuse for this. I mean, not just extremely bad manners, but the notion that you should play out this kind of conversation in public. We are habitually accustomed to people saying this will embolden Vladimir Putin. If you spilled your tea now on your laptop, someone will say this will embolden Vladimir Putin. But this really will embolden Vladimir Putin.
Although not at all trying to be a Trump apologist, because I do think that manner of treating somebody who, regardless of whatever you think about Zelensky as a leader, he is the representative of the Ukrainian people, and his office deserves respect, even if you choose not to respect him as a person. But I suppose what the American public will see is they have spent $350 billion, or however much it is, it's disputed, on Ukrainian weapons, and they now believe, or at least Trump camp now believes, that Zelensky is prolonging the war for his own purposes when actually it cannot be won, and the best thing humanly and economically is just to bring it to an end.
Which, you can make a point for, don't get me wrong. I'm a believer in the strong helping the weak, and unfortunately the Ukrainians were facing a military juggernaut when it came to Vladimir Putin and Russia. And I think it was an unwinnable war. However, it'd have been over a lot quicker if none of us had got involved and stood against people rolling on tanks through a sovereign nation. So I think we have done the right thing. The issue with Trump is he's trying to now paint this narrative that he's going to get all the money back, because basically he's now got Zelensky over a barrel and we're going to take all your minerals and I want something back for this. And he's said twice now on separate days that Europe are getting all their money back. That isn't true. We don't get the money back whatsoever. Yeah. He's trying to make this look like he's doing something for the world, when actually Donald Trump is always for Donald Trump, unfortunately.
One of the key things about that, which is true, is that if the president has said it, millions of people will hear it and not hear the rebuttal, not hear the correction. Millions of Americans will now believe that to be the case. When the international community, the Western international community, supported Ukraine, the Americans were part of that, and I thought it was tremendous. So the Americans deserve full amount of credit. Indeed, the debate was here in Europe, where we in the UK had to fly the material that we were sending to Ukraine around German airspace, which those involved have said, and I've listened to them, that it's a non-trivial difference. To have to divert around Germany meant they could fly fewer sorties, they could fly less stuff, they used more fuel, and our ability to deliver assistance to Ukraine was diminished by the Germans, who have, of course, changed their mind somewhat. The majority of their aid is economic, is money rather than material, but they are on board. But the American position to date has been stalwart. It's terrible, in my view, to see the erosion of that with President Trump saying what he's saying. But Matthew is right. You can make a pragmatic case that it's the right time to try to end the war. You don't have to claim Zelensky's in it for his own good to say that, you've got to try and take a broader view. I understand you want the entirety and every inch of Ukrainian soil. That may not be possible. But to repeat the point, this is not the right way to go about it. This is not the right way to talk to somebody and to persuade them of your position.
But a lot of Republican sources are claiming that Trump's become very frustrated personally with Zelensky, because what Zelensky has said with Trump in private, he's then gone and said something completely different in the Ukrainian media. Now, whether or not that's true, that's just speculation. But there does seem to be some quite serious personal antagonism now between the two men. There's obviously other things going on that we aren't seeing. But I think going back to the big picture of the war, I think in Europe there was so much consensus that the only thing that was morally right to do was to help Ukraine win the war, and yet we gave them enough material to keep fighting, but not enough to win. We obviously were not ever willing to commit troops, rightly so. They're not a NATO member. We don't want to get involved in a war with a nuclear power. But actually, was it just virtue signalling? Were we just trying to look like we were helping our European comrades when actually not really having the courage to go all in?
I I'm not sure about that because you sort of hinted. I think for me, anyway, it seemed a fine balance because you want to do just enough to stave off any more ground being taken or a further advance from the Russians. But I suppose the idea is that Vladimir Putin is like a bear you don't want to poke. And if Ukraine began to fight back and then actually began to encroach on Russian soil, what's to stop him going, right, you are now, as NATO allies, even though Ukraine are not part of it, you're waging war against Russia. We're going to now wage war against all of you lot that have taken part. And then before you know it, you're embroiled in what potentially could be World War III. So I think it maybe was a strategic balancing act, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I do agree that it put European nations in a difficult position. It's not actually true that everyone responded the same way. There are some Eastern European countries that took different perspectives, some more positive in supporting Ukraine than the West have been, and some less positive. But it's not complete unanimity. Nevertheless, there was a broad agreement that we should be assisting Ukraine. The trouble, as you say, Miriam, is that we were keeping them on life support. We were giving them enough to keep going, but not enough to make progress. But part of the reason for that is that we mischaracterised from the very beginning the West's ability to control Russia's ability to operate internationally. Remember the first year of this conflict, we talked about having shut Russia off from the world economy.
Down,
that wasn't true.
No.
We shut them off from the Western financial system. Our friends in India and China have taken a conspicuously different attitude, and the Middle East, a conspicuously different attitude towards continuing to deal with Russia, to significant profit on their parts. And those are facts that we can't change. And if Russia was continuing to be able to do that, then in the end it was going to be obvious that we, short of invading Russia ourselves, which I think is a scenario very, very few of us want, we had to come to some kind of negotiated peace. And that's the most frustrating thing here, because I think that's what Donald Trump is getting at, that we've got to get to some kind of pragmatic negotiated peace. The idea, the way you go about that, is to summon Zelensky to the White House and to shout at him and bully him in front of the world's assembled media, for me, is just crackers.
Matthew, there was a very interesting Twitter spat between J.D. Vance and Professor Sunil Ferguson a week or so ago, where Sunil Ferguson was accusing Trump and his camp of appeasing Russia, but like Britain did in 1938 to the Nazis, and Vance hit back and said that's the wrong historical comparison. There's absolutely no way anyone could ever have won against Russia. You need to have some realpolitik here. Now, it's quite interesting. Well, first, it's quite interesting that J.D. Vance is so willing to engage in Twitter spats with Brits, which is quite, it's quite interesting to watch. But do you think we are so hooked on this Second World War analogy in Europe that anything that happens, we sometimes have to relate it back to something that happened in the 1940s, and we can't see that this is a fresh situation? Russia have endless amounts of men and material that they can throw at this. They don't care how many lives they lose. So should we not have realised that back in 2022?
Possibly. I mean, I think it's one that people reach for because we're all taught it at school. It's something that we, are told to take great pride in beating the Nazis. We don't necessarily get taught about the Falklands and how obviously short that was. We don't necessarily do the Boer War because that was obviously embarrassing for us at the time, just about scraping through. Not ultimately in the end. I think there's a way to go about this, though, and it probably is the wrong historical context, but I think what it can look like is an appeasement. I think to put all your cards on the table. I know they talk about Trump and the art of the deal. He didn't write the book anyway, if we're really going there. But, this is the way he wants to go about things. I think there's a way to sort of put things out there. He did it yesterday. Someone, I think one of the journalists asked him alongside Keir Starmer, could Ukraine join NATO? And he said, no, it's not going to happen. I think most people will go, fair enough, it's unrealistic. But I think to sort of go, we just need to have peace at any cost, which is sort of what he's thinking.
At the beginning of the war, lots of Western European politicians were saying the answer to this is Ukraine to join NATO. Actually, Republicans were saying, don't be ridiculous.
Quite the reverse. You can't, I don't think, have... part of the rules between NATO is uncontested borders, and you can't be bordering, you can't be at war with a state on your border when you join, and they clearly would have been. I want to disagree with the question, part of the question that you just put to Matthew. Russia isn't undefeatable because of them limitless number of men and materiel. In fact, this conflict has exposed the Russian army as a paper tiger. We used to think the Russian army was the second best in the world. Then this conflict started and we realised they were the second best in Ukraine. And then the guys from the Wagner group, who are awful themselves, turned around and rebelled. And for a brief period of time, Russia was the second best army in Russia. Now, so the Russian ability to fight is actually underwhelming. The reason that Russia ultimately can't be beaten in this conflict is that Russia's a nuclear power. And the end point would be disastrous to push Putin to. And that's why you can't box them in too hard and too fast.
I would
850,000
I would agree
Russian society can't do it.
the nuclear factor is actually what has moved us on from Second World War analogies. I do agree with that, but I'm not claiming that Russia are a more competent army. They're clearly not. They certainly weren't in the Second World War or the First World War either. But what they do have is no care for the number of lives lost and relatively unlimited numbers of lives because of their size, their population, and they are still relatively industrialised compared to the Western powers. They produce way more shells, for example, than Europe and America do, and they're geared up for that, and they will keep doing it. And as long as we're not willing to wage nuclear war, they do have relatively endless resources compared to the West.
So the biggest thing that troubles me at the moment, of course, Trump pulling all aid from Ukraine would be terrible. But there's another aspect of this that means that Ukraine is at an advantage, a positive advantage, and it's the advanced material, like things like Starlink, and which the Americans are providing, and specifically Musk.
Yes.
Now, getting a vote through Congress to change the Americans' posture towards Ukraine might be quite difficult for Trump. Getting Musk to turn off Starlink support, and meaning that the most advanced scientific and technological aid to Ukraine is no longer available, that can be done overnight, and that would be very, very bad. So actually, this administration, people talk about the executive power and presidents saying things they can't do. On this, they really could, and that is the doomsday scenario for Zelensky, because he can see, appropriations dropping off a cliff in 7 months' time, but he could see his air cover turning off now.
And it's a scarily realistic prospect when you see what Elon Musk was tweeting earlier this afternoon. He's sharing the clip of Trump going, "Oh, look, everyone is dressed up for today," and laughing at it. So he clearly holds Zelensky in some sort of contempt the same way as Trump.
Don't you think in part that's because of this Trump saying you're playing at being the hero. We know you're not on the front line. It's sort of cosplay. But I really respect the way that Zelensky dresses like his troops. He dresses like the common man. But there is another interpretation that you can mock on that. The trouble for Trump is the humour sometimes works. When he said at Starmer, "Oh, nice suit," we were laughing because we're thinking, "Yeah, Lord Ali's chuffed that you gave him the compliment," right? But everyone in the room laughs because it's a nice, easy, gentle thing. Yes. When you take the mickey out of the uniform being worn by a guy whose country is at war, it comes off, and it's dependent on you for your support, it comes across terribly.
But that's why I think there is some personal antagonism here behind the scenes, because Trump is normally relaxed. Starmer's been quite rude about Trump in the past, and yet Trump can easily let that go because Starmer's now trying to please Trump, and Britain wants to be on good terms with the US. But he's wound up, he's angry, he's obviously saying, he is playing the strong man, and Trump sees America as the strong country. And really, we're back to Middle Ages politics, vassal states. We've got more money and weapons than you, therefore we're more important.
Yeah, and this is actually what worried me about Starmer's impending visit, because I forget who it was, but it was a Republican of sorts that said before the election that Donald Trump forgives, but when he forgives you for what you've done, he will humiliate you. And that sort of felt like what he was doing to Zelensky.
And he wants repentance, and Zelensky does not get repentance.
He's not giving it him.
So I think the reason that Trump is behaving like this, in part, people forget almost everything you say in the course of a campaign. People say, don't make promises you can't keep. Actually, politics teaches us the electorate forgets most of it. But one thing the electorate won't forget is Trump saying he could solve this conflict overnight, and he hasn't. And one of the reasons he hasn't been able to is the complete unwillingness, for understandable reasons, of the administration in Kyiv to make any concessions. And that's, I think, why he's frustrated.
I think what also is interesting, and again, Trump says things much more brazenly than European, and other American leaders would say, but this kind of accusation that Zelensky is a dictator, that Ukraine is corrupt. We have almost idolised Ukraine over the last couple of years. But in 2015, The Guardian printed a long article saying that Ukraine was the most corrupt country in Europe. And actually, if you look at some of the kind of less legacy media, the more kind of media on the edges, there are plenty of stories now of people in Ukraine being disappeared into the armed forces, that some of the aid money is going into mysterious places, that people are being sacked for no reason. And of course, there are no elections. So do you think we've been a little bit naive in the West about what's really going on in Ukraine?
I think you've got to... First of all, it's very easy for Russia to be the bad guy. They always are, right? That's the way it's always been with the West.
100 years.
Yeah, no, exactly. So first of all, that. I don't know as much as what you've been saying. I'll take that as sort of face value, and if that's the case, I think you should always have eyes open and ears open with anything like this. However, I think it comes back to, regardless of what's going on, this is one of the most corrupt countries based on certain metrics. It still is. there's still innocent people involved in this, and I do think it's right when you're a stronger nation or you have things behind you that you step up to the plate, because God forbid it happened anywhere like this. I would want people to remember that and them step up for us, and that's what I think it's about, being part of, even though they're not in NATO, part of an alliance, a world alliance, in that you don't allow other countries to do this to other countries, sovereign nations.
Well, first of all, no, with due respect to The Guardian, no country in Europe could be considered the most corrupt whilst Belarus is still in Europe. Our last absolute dictatorship, which is a plutocratic state run for the benefit of its still ostensibly communist, actually it turns out kleptocratic leader. So that's point one. But point two, yes, Ukraine has been corrupt for some time in its institutions, in its economic model. None of that justifies the invasion and the loss of life that's occurred. So I really deeply regret the Trump, but the idea there's an equivalence between the administration in Kyiv, which hasn't had an election because it got invaded and may have some corruption in its systems, and Vladimir Putin's system is completely wrong.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you who've just joined us, in the last few minutes, we have been watching a heated exchange between Zelensky and Trump. And we're just going to play that interview again now, in case you missed it.
Align myself with both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, "Hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal?" That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred, and I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way. So that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden, of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now the President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014
2014.
and 2015.
2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
That's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
I'm not playing
cards.
cards.
Right now, you don't.
I'm
You're
very
playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you think
You're
about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's
with
back
all
to
respect to
you.
your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once? This
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting, have
today.
you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's
Can I-
in big
can I-
trouble.
can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No,
Can
you've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and your
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
if
West?
you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I
over
understand,
there.
sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running
I
low
know.
on soldiers.
Don't-
Listen,
don't, please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what-
That
what
wasn't
this
with me.
means. It
That was
wasn't
with
with you.
a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
But this
That
is
was
your,
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry, here.
It'll be a tough deal to make,
Um,
because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you
but
saying?
what if
She's asking, what if Russia
Putin
breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now?
But they have
Okay?
weapons to
What if they
fire.
broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia, the 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television, I will say that. All right. We'll see what we can do about putting it together. Thank you.
Guys, let's go. Guys, come on, let's go.
We'll see. I don't know.
All right, guys, come on. Please. Hey, come on. Guys, come on. Let's move, please.
Thank you.
Well, an absolutely extraordinary press conference there in the White House between Zelensky and Trump and J.D. Vance. And while we've been live on air, we've had a statement from President Donald Trump, who said, "We have had a very meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion, and I've determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he's ready for peace." That was a statement from Donald Trump in the last few minutes. And we've just had breaking news that President Zelensky has left the White House early after that contentious meeting. There was supposed to be a press conference scheduled for 7 o'clock GMT, but that, we believe, has been cancelled and Zelensky has left. Well, an absolutely extraordinary meeting, and Trump has now, according to that statement, pulled out of peace talks with Ukraine and Russia. Matthew, extraordinary development. Trump clearly sees himself as a neutral broker. He's not on anybody's side, and he thinks that Zelensky wants the American advantage, where Trump just sees himself as a neutral go-between.
Donald Trump is not a neutral broker. I think it's actually a very sad day, without sounding melodramatic. I think Zelensky may have gone there with some hope. I think the Ukrainian people will have known this meeting was happening and will have had huge hope that this may have come to an end, or there was light at the end of the tunnel, that actually the bombs will stop raining down. And admittedly, concessions will no doubt have to be made. There will be no joining of NATO. There may be land that will not be returned and therefore occupied, and that's not right. But I think the vast majority of people probably do want this to be over. It must be hellish to be living through this for the last 3 years. And I can't help but feel, the more that time goes on, that this actually feels like a bit of a setup. Trump has signed his minerals deal, he's happy with what he's got, and he's had him there just to humiliate him and send him on his way. A deeply sad day, and actually the world continues to feel very, very unstable at this point in time.
Well, we've got an American journalist now on the line, Audrey McAlpine, who's based in Kyiv. Audrey, thank you so much for joining us. An extraordinary, I can't even find the words, an extraordinary press conference there. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, what do you think the reaction's going to be like in Ukraine?
It certainly was. I can tell you just here on the ground, the Ukrainians that I've spoke with are absolutely shocked. I think many of them had hopes that the result of this deal would be a favorable one. Perhaps, I think like everyone believed that they would be signing this minerals deal today. And then quickly, it soon just absolutely decayed into utter mayhem. So the feeling on the ground is a lot of anxiety. People are quite scared about what comes next.
I mean, I imagine a lot of people in Ukraine saw a Trump victory in that November election as a possibility for peace. They would have believed, probably quite rightly, that Trump would have been on the side of the Ukrainians in any negotiations. And now they've seen their president, their leader, humiliated on the world stage.
Soldiers and yourself, in the sense that
Humiliating experience. I mean, you had J.D. Vance basically asking him, publicly humiliating him, both of them calling for him that he should be more thankful, that he was not being grateful enough. And that is shocking because just a few weeks ago, I was there in the GB studio saying myself that Ukrainians were confident that a Trump presidency could bring them a just peace and could negotiate with Russia from a position of strength on their behalf. And it's just turning out to be almost completely the opposite.
Now, Trump's position, certainly over recent days, is that Zelensky is not necessarily the leader that the West has portrayed him to be. He's accused him of being corrupt, of being a dictator. Is that how Ukrainians see things?
Of course, their last election was in 2019, but over the last 20 years, they've had 5 different presidential elections. So there's certainly not the feeling that he's a dictator. It's sort of like you can speak badly about the family within the family, but no one else outside can. And that's how Ukrainians feel about Zelensky. It's one thing for them to criticize their leader, but it's a whole other thing for Trump to do so.
How do you think Putin and the Russians will react to this press conference?
I think they will love this press conference. I think if you're Vladimir Putin right now, you're watching this and you're thinking that this was a favorable outcome for Russia today. It certainly makes Zelensky look very bad. And certainly the Ukrainian people will be going to bed tonight wondering what they're going to be waking up to tomorrow.
Now, do you think, Audrey, this is an opportunity for European nations, for Western European nations particularly, to stand up to Trump? Do you think they will do that? Do you think that they will continue to pledge support for Ukraine? Or do you think it's game over now for Western support?
Well, just this week here in Kyiv, you had all the European leaders here meeting with Zelensky, certainly pledging their support for Ukraine. And we should remember that last year, Europe actually gave more than the United States did to Ukraine. So I think this is certainly a moment where European leaders will step up. And it is surprising because, of course, we just had the Prime Minister there yesterday and Macron there earlier this week. And I think Zelensky certainly thought it would be a similar sort of outcome for Ukraine, which it wasn't. But I personally believe that you will see Europe unite behind Ukraine. At least that's what Ukrainians hope.
And Audrey, I appreciate you're based in Ukraine and not the US, but how do ordinary Americans feel about this war? Are they particularly knowledgeable about what's going on? Do they see Russia as the aggressor? Do they want America to pull support? What's the kind of popular opinion in the States?
I think it's quite mixed. I think that many Americans view it similarly to Afghanistan and Iraq, where they felt that they spent almost $1 trillion and had nothing to show for it. I think most Americans also would like to see an end to the fighting and an end to the war, and perhaps, unfortunately, are not as well versed on the nuances of Ukraine. So I think most Americans want to see this war end, and they probably would support Trump in finishing it.
Now, I can't imagine what the last 3 years have been like for ordinary people in Ukraine. Obviously, a large number have left as refugees, many hundreds of thousands across Europe. But for the people who've stayed, and of course the men who have fought and the many thousands of men who've died, this has been just the most extraordinary, horrific experience. Do you think Ukrainians are now worried that this could just go on and on and on?
I think that is the fear. Of course, many Ukrainians believe that this war started in 2014 when in the Donbass region there was ongoing skirmishes with Russian soldiers. So for them, this war does feel like it has gone on and on and on. I think the problem with ending it is that so many people have died that if they don't receive a just peace, it feels like they've died for nothing. You walk by the cemeteries in Ukraine, and every time you do, they're just fuller and fuller with more and more graves. Every person here has a story. Everyone here has lost someone. So for them to just give in to an unjust peace seems unlikely, but yet their hands are tied. This press conference tonight really puts them not in a very favorable position, unfortunately.
And we're just hearing media reports that the press conference that was supposed to follow that exchange in the Oval Office has actually been cancelled, and that Zelensky has left early. So it does seem that for now, at least, those peace talks are completely off the table, and we have to wonder what's going to happen next in terms of when they will resume. That's Audrey McAlpine. Thank you so much for joining us. Audrey McAlpine, who's an American journalist based in Kyiv. Thank you so much for your time. And back to the panel. Alex, so the peace talks are over, and you were saying earlier that one of Trump's promises on coming back to the presidency, back to the White House, was that this war would end on day one. We seem a long way from that now.
Well, now he's got, in his mind, however unjustifiably to my perspective or the perspective of others, he's got someone to blame. He will say, this is all Zelensky's fault. I can't work with this guy. I was going to broker a peace, but here is this person. The more I consider the press conference that we just watched, and it was quite hard to have any reaction other than shock when you first took it in, the more I consider it, the more I wonder about Trump's position being manufactured. I wonder about him going into that room determined to come out with a wedge between him and Zelensky, either to be able to say to people at the negotiating table, we're not going to back them on everything, as you can see, you know, they're going to have to make concessions, and I've made them see that, or to be able to say, I wash my hands of it. Your problem, Zelensky's fault.
Matthew, quick word from you.
I agree. I don't disagree with everything Alex has said, and I think it may well have been manufactured. He's going to come out of this, as he said, with someone to blame. Trump isn't someone that takes responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. And he can point to Zelensky as, you know, not being grateful, disrespectful, or whatever else he wants to say. Very depressing, really.
Yes, and for ordinary Ukrainians watching that or waking up tomorrow to the headlines, that not only has their hope for peace seemingly disappeared, but actually their president's been insulted on the world stage. Oh,
he absolutely has. I tweeted in the course of that conference that everyone came out of it badly. Shows that you should continue to watch something to the end, because by the end it was unambiguous that Donald Trump was just humiliating and bullying President Zelensky. There is one potential ray of light for the Ukrainians in this business, which is that as a result of this manufactured or otherwise kerfuffle in the Oval Office, they have not signed the minerals deal. And it looks like they haven't signed the minerals deal. And that may, in the medium and long term, be better for Ukraine. Now, I know that that is pretty thin gruel compared to all the concerns they will have tonight, but it may be in their country's interest not to have done that deal with Donald Trump's America.
Now, we have learnt from now 8 or so years, or no, longer than that, of Trump in politics, that he can say some seemingly pretty crazy out there things, and yet often he seems to be playing a long game. Could that be the case here? Could this be almost performative? Could there be reason behind this?
I think it's always performative, and I've always long had the theory that, you know, Trump is never really across lots of detail. He appears to be just parroting whatever he's been told by the person that he's just seen last. And actually the real brains will be behind him in advisors and people like J.D. Vance that are a lot better across all aspects of foreign policy. I do wonder what this means for us in this country as well, though, because Keir Starmer, you know, for all the optics, appeared to play a blinder yesterday. Didn't get anything that he really wanted. That's not to discount that he did quite well diplomatically. You know, there was no concessions on a backstop or any sort of guarantees for that matter. If Trump is to go a certain way on this now and go, right, we're cutting off, we've had enough, I've tried, he's disrespected us, and now I've got my sort of get out as such, what do we do? Do we stick with our strongest allies, our oldest allies, or do we continue to stand against essentially dictators? Because I think the natural world order has only ever stayed this way because America has actually always stood against dictators If that is now changing, what happens?
Well, I think one of the most interesting statements in that conference was J.D. Vance saying that the path to peace is diplomacy, which definitely suggests that they're not interested in fighting any wars. Well, for those of you who have not yet seen that explosive press conference that's going to go down in history, we're going to replay it again for you now. This is from the Oval Office just an hour ago.
This is just Ukraine, isn't it?
So we've actually known each other for a long time. We've been dealing with each other for a long time and very well. We had a little negotiation spat, but that worked out great. I think for both countries, I think for the world, actually, beyond both countries. And we have something that is a very fair deal. And we look forward to getting in and digging and working and getting some of the rare earth. But it means we're going to be inside, and it's a big commitment from the United States, and we appreciate working with you very much. And we will continue to do that. We have had some very good discussions with Russia. I spoke with President Putin, and we're going to try and bring this to a close. It's something that you want and that he wants. We're going to have to negotiate a deal, but we've started the confines of a deal, and I think something can happen. The big thing is the number of soldiers, mostly at this point, but soldiers being killed. You're losing thousands of soldiers. On both sides, we're losing a lot of soldiers, and we want to see it stop. And we want to see the money get put to different kinds of use, like rebuilding. And we're going to be working very hard. But we've had a lot of very good conversations. I will say until we came along, the Biden administration didn't speak to Russia whatsoever. They didn't speak to anybody. They just allowed this to continue. And I will say that, I'll say in front of you, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, if I were president, this war would have never happened. We would have had a deal negotiated for you without having to go through what you've gone through. But your soldiers have been unbelievably brave. We've given them great equipment, but somebody has to use the equipment. They've been unbelievably brave, and we give them great credit. This was supposed to be over very quickly, and here we are 3 years later. So I give tremendous credit to your generals and your soldiers and yourself in the sense that it's been very hard fighting, very tough fighting. They're great fighters. And you have to be very proud of them from that standpoint. But now we want to get it over with. It's enough, right? We want to get it over with. So it's an honor to have you here. Thank you very much for coming. We're going to sign the agreement at the conference in the East Room in a little while, right after lunch. And we'll be having lunch together. We're also discussing some other things. And we appreciate everybody being here. It's somewhat of an exciting moment, but the really exciting moment is when we get when they stop the shooting or we end up with a deal. And I think we're fairly close to getting that, and an honor to have you. And please, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you for invitation. And really, I hope that this first document, will be first step to real security guarantees for Ukraine, our people, our children. I really count on it. And of course, we count that America will not stop support. Really, for us, it's very important to support and to continue it. I want to discuss it with details further during our conversation, and of course, the infrastructure or security guarantees. Because for today, I understand what Europe is ready to do. And of course, I want to discuss with you what the United States will be ready to do. And I really count on your strong position to stop Putin. And you said that enough with the war. I think that is very important, Ben, to say these words to Putin at the very beginning of war, because he is a killer and terrorist. But I hope that together we can stop him. But for us, it's very important to, to save our country, our values, our freedom, the democracy, and of course, no compromises with the killer about our territories, but it will be later. And of course, what I wanted, we spoke about it by phone with you, about the drones production. We have very good drones production. I think the best one in the world for today because of the war. Yes, and of course, we need very much the air defense. You have the best air defense in the world, and really you helped us under attacks of Russians. And I want to speak how we can exchange the licenses. We're open to share the licenses of all our drones with you, of course, with the United States. And we need licenses for quick production of air defense. Even after the war, we need our nation to be calm, that we are secure. So that's why we need this air shield. And of course, about this, I want to speak about the contingents. I think that France and UK already spoke to you, and we know that Europe is ready, but without the United States, they will not be ready to be as strong as we need. And the last point, last not least, about exchange, about our people and children. And you know that these crazy Russians, that they stolen 20,000 of children, Ukrainian children. They changed their names, they changed their families, relatives, and now they're in Russia. We want to bring them back, and really, it's a big dream, task, and goal for me, and our warriors. By the way, Mr. President, we released more than 4,000 warriors from Russian prison, but there are thousands more in the prison. I wanted to share with you some images. How it's. Just can I now?
Yeah, please.
Please. 1 minute. Just you to understand in what circumstances, in what situation they are, and what the attitude of Russia to our prisoners. That guys, just you before and after. And you see before and after, just you to understand. Now thousands of such guys, ladies and men, there. And that, so they don't eat, they beat them, and they, they do a lot of, bad things. So out of, even during the war, there are rules. Everybody knows there are rules during the war. So these guys, they don't have any rules. You see that, 50, 60 kilograms left, and a lot of such things. And I didn't want to show you what the changes with images of children, because I will share with you. And I mean, it's looking tragic.
Yeah, that's tough stuff.
I wanted very much to give you, and you see.
Yeah.
This is pastor, by the way. They stolen pastors because it's not Russian church. They stolen pastors and moved pastors to the prison. At the end of last year, we brought 3 pastors, and we could exchange them. And this is pastor, you see.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. So I mean, this I wanted to show you, and this. So thank you very much.
We want to get that ended, right?
Yeah. Of course. We
And
want.
I think we will. And
We have to, of course.
do you have any questions, please?
Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. With the, how much money is the U.S. going to put into the fund that is being created today, and how does this provide long-term security for Ukraine?
Well, we don't know exactly how much, because we're going to be putting some money in a fund that we're going to get from the raw earth that we're going to be taking and sharing in terms of revenue. So it's going to be a lot of money will be made from the sale and from the use of raw earth. And as you know, our country doesn't have much raw earth. We have a lot of oil and gas, but we don't have a lot of the raw earth. And what we do have is protected by the environmentalists, but that can be unprotected, but still it's not very much. They have among the best in the world in terms of raw earth. So we're going to be using that, using it for all of the things we do, including AI and including weapons and the military, and it's really going to very much satisfy our needs. So it's something that just worked out really well. We have a lot of oil, and we have a lot of gas, we have a lot, but we don't have raw earth. So this has just about every component of the raw earth that we need for computers, for all of the things we do. This puts us in great shape.
And the long-term security for Ukraine, how does this provide it?
I think they're going to have great luck. I think once we make the agreement, that's going to be 95% of it. They're not going to go back to fighting. I've spoken with President Putin, and I feel very strong. I've known him for a long time, and I feel very strongly that they're very serious about it. and we'll make a deal. And when the deal is made, I don't think, we talk about security. Everyone's talking about the other day, all they talked about was security. I said, let me make the deal first. I have to make the deal first. I don't worry about security right now. We have to have a deal, because right now, last week, 2,000 soldiers died on both sides. 2,000. And they're losing 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 a week. So as we sit here and we talk, people are getting shot and dying on the battlefield. And, you know, they're not American soldiers, but they're Russian soldiers and they're Ukrainian soldiers, and we want to be able to stop it. And we want to be able also to spend money on other things. We don't want to, this is a tremendous amount of money. And what the Biden administration did was terrible. They were giving money, but he had no security on the money. Europe, as you know, gave much less money, but they had security. It was in the form of a loan. They get their money back, and we didn't. And now, at least we're protected, because the American taxpayer has to be protected too. But this is an incredible agreement for Ukraine, because we have a big investment in their country now, and what they have, very few people have. And we're able to really go forward with very, very high-tech things and many other things, including weaponry that we're going to use in many locations, but that we need for our country.
Mr. President.
This allows us to do that.
Mr. President. Will you continue? Sending military aid?
Yes, go ahead, please.
If I can just, yes. In the document, there is one of the very important points. If we speak about business and investment, we never had LNG terminals in Ukraine. This document will open. I mean, the next documents, but anyway, here we see in the framework, we see really goodwill for this. LNG terminals for us is very important, and I think for security of European continent. We have the biggest storage, gas storage. We have the biggest in Europe. Yes, yes, and we can use it. Use it for LNG. Use it for LNG, and we will do it. And really, we can help Europe, because Europe really helped. President Trump said that they made less support, but they are our friends, and they are our very supportive partners. They really gave a lot, Mr. President. Really, they did.
They gave a lot, but they gave much less.
No.
Much less.
No. No.
Don't argue with me.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. President Trump, you have repeatedly called the deal with Ukraine as a historical one. And as a President of the United States, you make historical decisions in other issues which affect America and other world. So what place in the world history do you want to take? And do you associate yourself with any famous historical figures?
Yeah, I'd say George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. I would say I'm far superior to George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. Now, you know I'm only kidding, right? Because when I say that, the fake news is going to go wild. They're going to say he considers himself to be better than Washington. But you never know. You never know. I don't compare myself to anybody. I'm here to do a job. We've had a great 35 days or whatever it might be, a month, a little more than a month. We've accomplished tremendous amounts. Not only this would be a very great achievement if we could get the war stopped and get them back to normalization. I think that's going to happen. We've had very good talks on both sides, as you know. But I think we've done a very good job, just generally. If you look at all of the things we've done, and